your news, your views, your values. This is WMNF Tampa 88.5 FM.
You are tuned to WMNF Radio 88.5 FM. This is the public affairs program called Community Speaks, and I'm your host, Patro Mabili. Of course, this is an opportunity to talk to you. Today, Florida is preparing for Hurricane Milton. As we heard, it has grown into a Category 5 storm. Today is also a geopolitical milestone, as this is the one-year anniversary since Israel was attacked by Hamas, hostages taken, and over the past year, more than 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza as Israel has declared war on the group. The month of October on WNF's mission calendar is dedicated also to people with disabilities. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. Take your telephone calls and your emails. You can email me, of course, dj@wmnf.org. You can call us 813-239-9663. Once upon a time, I worked as a direct care professional, taking care of people with developmental disabilities. A shout out to my former employer, Mentor Florida, and all others, of course, for the work that they do for this very vulnerable population, to bring normalcy to their lives. They live in homes, in regular neighborhoods, go to public school, and have regular doctor visits with very little family support. And I took care of them as they approached adulthood. But oftentimes, these precious people age out of the care system and into homelessness, out on the street to fend for themselves. So, we could talk about how that is one thing in society that we need to work on. One of those organizations or places in this state is Florida Atlantic University. They've been doing some work to that end. Florida Atlantic University and College of Education and the College of Engineering and Computer Science have received a $9 million grant from the United States Department of Education's Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services to increase the capacity and participation of transition age youth and working age adults with disabilities in high demand technology jobs locally and nationally. So a shout out to Florida Atlantic for that. This is a 5-year project advancing career choices for its employment success in technology, Access Technology, advancing career choices for employment success in technology, also known as Access Technology. You'll probably be hearing more about that. This will assist individuals with disabilities nationwide and acquire certified skills needed for entry into high-quality technology sector jobs. The program, which can serve as a model for similar initiatives, will offer career counseling, work readiness skills training, and customized training leading to a certificate in cybersecurity, cloud computing solutions, and computer-aided design and 3D printing. So that's quite a program, for this vulnerable population who have been locked out of normalcy. And as I said, when I worked, that was the whole point, is to bring normalcy to their lives. But as they become adults, and if they don't have the educational skills, some of them can work entry-level jobs. Goodwill, Salvation Army, they've done a good job at providing opportunities for people with disabilities to work there. But this is a technology sector opportunity being offered by Florida and Atlantic University. So that's one shout out I'd like to give, because we do need to replicate these types of efforts. This is a population that whatever goes on in the world, I worry about how they're reacting to it. When we have a hurricane, I worry about the population of those who are developmentally disabled. The COVID pandemic, how many of them, I'm worried about how many of those homes where they've been were taken care of while they were in pandemic, and how many of that population actually fell victim to the virus. So when it came to schools, a lot of kids with developmental disabilities found it easier to stay home and school from home virtually, so that it was a lot easier on them, and they didn't have a lot of people around them as they were trying to go to school. So virtual schooling may be something that we want to keep going for that vulnerable population. But there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people who are working with that population, have worked, and we'll probably hear from them over the course of the month of October, as this is the month on our mission calendar that we are looking at this issue closely. But we are also looking at the campaign, the election campaign that is coming up. A lot has happened, especially as we are watching the anniversary, all of the events around the anniversary of the geopolitical crisis that the two candidates in the presidential campaign here have had to respond to. We need to know exactly what the future looks like, as both of them, former President 45 and Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, they marking today's anniversary, talking about the issue in the October 7th attack. Harris and Trump are marking this anniversary of the presidential campaign's approach to final weeks, with this widening conflict in the Middle East seen as a growing challenge to them. 45 will speak before the Jewish community leaders at one of his Florida resorts here in Florida, down in the Miami suburb of Doral, and Harris will briefly speak to journalists, and she's going to plant a pomegranate tree with her husband on the grounds of the vice president's residence in honor of those who were killed on October 7th last year. 45 has sought to paint Harris as anti-Semitic and taking advantage of some of the divisions within the Democratic Party over the Israel-Hamas war. So that's not a surprise. But political leaders across the spectrum are marking this anniversary, killing the killing of about 1,200 people, including the 46 U.S. citizens by Hamas-led militants in the October 7th attack last year, and the taking of about 250 hostages. A year later, about 100 people, including several U.S. citizens, remain in captivity as the U.S.-led efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and hostage release deal have sputtered out. So, in fact, the conflict has widened, and President Joe Biden is set to mark this occasion in an event at White House Blue Room, lighting a memorial candle to mark the anniversary. Republican candidate, he's, as I said, will speak to Jews, but calling somebody anti-Semitic on the Democratic side is idiotic, to say the least. But he's been lying all this time. I guess we're just sort of numb to the lies as it is. He just says a whole lot of things just to hear himself talk. But the attack sparked a war in Gaza as Israel moved to root out Hamas's control over the territory and try to return those who were taken captive. So, the world has been responding to all of the events. In another, we see that the Hamas is an Iran-backed group, but another Iran-backed group, Hezbollah, has fired thousands of rockets at Israel's territory during the same period from Lebanon. And Israel last month expanded a campaign of sabotage and assassination and launched a ground incursion into Lebanon to combat the threat from the group. Some of the former president's statements on Israel overlook his association with people who spew anti-Semitic rhetoric, such as the far-right activists he had dinner with, Nick Fuentes, and, of course, rapper Ye. That's what he called himself now, Kanye West's formal name. But 45 has repeatedly said that Jewish voters who vote for Democrats, quote, should have their head examined, and recently said that if he loses the presidential election to Harris on November 5, the Jewish people would really have a lot to do with that. So why is he calling somebody else anti-Semitic when that is all he is spewing, and it's a lot of his supporters are spewing, especially right here in Florida, where they've been very visible, taking over highways and dropping down anti-Semitic banners and taking over Disney World. And what's going on in Orlando is something that will be studied, for time immemorial. But 45's own relations with Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has been soured after the prime minister became one of the world's first world leaders to congratulate Joe Biden for his 2020 victory. So that's the sort of thing that will make 45 really mad at you. But we're going to continue to cover all of the events around this somber anniversary and how that's playing politically in this election campaign. But the latest, Palestinians in Gaza have fired a barrage of rockets into Israel as they mark this anniversary. Hamas has said it attacked Israel forces in different parts of Gaza today. The military said it launched a wave of artillery and airstrikes overnight and into today to thwart what it said was an imminent attack. It said it targeted Hamas's launch post and underground militant infrastructure. The fighting on the anniversary underscored the militants' resistance, in the face of a devastating Israeli offensive that has killed some 42,000 Palestinians. The numbers have risen, but that's according to medical officials in Palestine. So that's part of the latest what has been going on in the fighting as people marking this geopolitical anniversary. Countries around the world commemorate this day with vigils, commemorations, acts of remembrance. They're being held across the world to mark this event. And, there's a lot of commentary that has been going on. We're going to want to hear from you as well today. The number to call, of course, is 813-239-9663. If you want to weigh in on what is happening as people are marking today, October 7th, or we could talk about people with disabilities and what we're doing on that front, especially to prevent growing homelessness among those who have aged out of the care system. 813-239-9663. You see that some of you are calling. Let's see what you have to add to this conversation today here on Community Speaks. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, I was calling. I was actually trying to reach the office.
Okay, 813-238-8001.
That's perfectly fine. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'd like the public to know that Ken Welsh, the mayor of St. Pete, made an announcement yesterday that they would be opening the Raytheon site, which is the EPA Superfund site. It used to be Elbit Systems under the name E-Systems in the Azalea neighborhood in the Tyrone area of St. Pete. There's already a toxic plume beneath the neighborhood of Azalea that the Azalea Neighborhood Association has been fighting to have cleaned up, and Raytheon refuses to clean it up. Now Ken Welsh has opened a closed site that the EPA has closed down, which has toxic substances on the surface and beneath the surface. So while he opened this for a brush site, he's opened the city to toxic pollution from this Raytheon disaster that happened in the early 2000s. I'm sure you're familiar with it. If not, if anybody wants to look it up, you can look up EPA, or rather Raytheon Superfund site, St. Pete. There's Tampa Bay Times articles. There's actual EPA documents on the the toxic exposure. The chemicals that are there are also present at Camp Lejeune and are related to advanced kidney cancers that kill people within 12 years. The Azalea Against Apartments have been fighting the development of this area, which they are seeking to turn into low-income housing. I feel the city is using this as a way to give Raytheon kickbacks or the owner kickbacks, or give them some sort of money while they're sitting on this toxic property under all this controversy of development. It's crucial that people go down to the site and tell them to close it down. It's crucial that people call Ken Welsh and tell him to close this site down, that we don't need toxic pollution all over our city. And it's crucial that people shut down Raytheon and shut down Collins Aerospace, which is right across the street, which makes weapons for the F-16s, which are those missiles are falling on people in Gaza, people in Lebanon, people in Syria, people in Iraq, people in Yemen. It's absolutely despicable that we would open this site on at a time where Raytheon is making record profits and killing and poisoning people all throughout Palestine and the occupied territories and that region of Asia. But I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on that, and I would hope that somebody would follow up on that.
Yes, we certainly will. That's very interesting, and be interesting to know what the mayor gave as his justification for allowing this site to remain open. I'm looking at a story that were plans. This is a 29-acre former Raytheon Technology site in West St. Petersburg, and they've have changed for at least third time in 3 years. The local developers now hope a proposed public-private partnership will see the project, dubbed Azalea Gateway, to fruition. The development could eventually feature 1,000 mixed-income apartments at a particular address, but funding remains an issue. So there will be a follow-up on that. We see that the Azalea Porterland LLC, which is led by Les Porter, now seeks $4.9 million from the city and $9.9 million from Pinellas County to begin the project's first phase. But, you know, we're going to definitely follow up on it because the developer is requesting like $14.8 million for Raytheon's site project. And if it's a toxic site, I don't know what sense it makes to build on it. It said there's been extensive environmental remediation efforts began after Raytheon purchased the property in 1995. The housing developer manager for the city explained that the developers could not utilize groundwater. The site also has stormwater management restrictions. The developer must implement vapor barriers, controls beneath living spaces as part of their due diligence as they go through the application process. So we'll learn more about all of that is going on. So, you know, a lot has been happening in the city of St. Petersburg that we need to follow up on, and that certainly will be one. There's been apparently some previous proposals for that property. The city council approved plans back in February of 2021. The county's planning agency voted against the project and associated land use changes the following month. So we're going to see what has transpired. We're going to talk more about that, the contamination, about that. Today we're looking at the efforts to help people with disabilities, and also with marking this anniversary and how that is happening, this anniversary of the October 7th attacks, because that is having a lot of impact politically around the world, especially here in the United States. Now that the conflict is raging on multiple fronts, people have had to weigh in on it. It's the political campaign in this country is coming to an end, thankfully. People have had to speak out on what we will do going forward. And I don't know if there's much of a solution there that we can really have any control over, because this is a conflict. This is a long-running conflict. And so it's going to be interesting to see how we continue to engage on that issue. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. We're looking at economic issues. We're looking at a lot of social issues. And we've seen the power of women and we look at the possibility of electing the first woman to high office, to the White House. But we're also looking at how the working classes, more Black and Latino women, are leading unions and are transforming how they work. Women make up roughly half of the U.S. labor union membership, but representatives and top-level union leadership positions has lagged, and even in female-dominated industries, and particularly for women of color. But Black and Latino women are starting to gain ground, landing top positions at some of the biggest unions in the United States, who experience Black and Latino women who experience a wide gender pay gap, and face intersectional headwinds of both racism and sexism in their careers, are particularly attuned to inequalities in the workplace and are increasingly stepping up to fight them as union leaders. So, this is empowerment, but Black and Latino women are starting to gain ground, as I said, but some of the biggest unions in the U.S. that has translated into wins at the bargaining tables that focuses more attention on family-friendly benefits like parental leave and health care coverage, as well as protections against sexual harassment. So it took women who were experiencing these things to put them in power to help fight against these scourges. Often when people think about unions, they think of a white guy in a hard hat. That's according to people who historian Lane Wyndham, who has been asked about this issue. This is a Georgetown University labor historian, Lane Wyndham. But Hospitality Union Unite Here's membership is majority women and people of color. And last month, more than 12,000 of them across 6 states went on strike to push for wage increases and fair workloads and more affordable health care under the leadership of Gwen Mills, who in June became the first woman to be elected union president in its 130-year history. That's Unite Here Union. 813-239-9663 is the number to call if you have something to add here on this show, Community Speaks, as we are commemorating October 7th and empowerment and looking at the fights against inequality. And we'll probably look at some of what is happening at the Supreme Court as it's reopened this term. Go ahead, caller. You're on Community Speaks.
Oh, wow. I'm already on the air. Well, how are you doing, Mr. Mobili?
Pretty good. You?
Oh, okay. After talking to you on a certain show we will not mention because we are on Monday right now.
That's right.
Well, I wanted to come on here and clown with somebody, and I'm in a clowning mood right now. But
okay, I like
hearing
that.
some things I heard this morning. Yeah, I'm glad we're coming to the end of the election, and I want you, those of you who support a certain candidate, to keep on pushing because it's not over with. And she told you, I gave it away. She told you. You're going to have to keep on pushing and keep voting. Make sure you vote. Go out there and vote. People, they're counting on the hurricanes. You get discouraged. But like Family Band would play through the storm and the wind, go on out there and vote. And I want to say something. I'm listening also about what aids can be done for the handicapped. And also, forgive me, Mobili, I won't do this again, but I gotta do this. And I know you out there, you still supporting Donald Trump. You heard me. Simon, bye, Mobili, have a good day.
Thank you so much for that. That was a little bit of a comic relief from Daryl. 813-239-9663. And yes, this is a time to talk about all of the inequality, the fact that we have slipped backwards as a reaction to the loss of the 2020 election, that people have allowed themselves to slip backwards politically and support, backward motion and disempowerment of women, disempowerment of people of color. They've been talking about getting rid of diversity and equity and inclusion in the workplace. All of this has been taking place over the last 4 or so years, 8 years, because it began under 45's administration, where people felt emboldened to sort of go backwards. And so this is a campaign that's insisting that we will not go back. And as I was talking about how, women are empowering themselves in the workplace, in unions, the momentum for Black and Latino women rising into labor union members' leadership has picked up in the last 5 years. But the work began long before that by our foremothers, and they who laid this foundation and have been pushing and kicking those doors open for decades. This is from one leader, a female leader at the AFL-CIO, Federation of 60 National International Labor Unions, who in June of 2022 became this. Liz Shuler became the first woman in history to lead the AFL-CIO. The Me Too movement has really emboldened women across the board, including labor, to say that I'm not going to be sitting on the sidelines. Today's examples of diverse union leaders include Becky Pringle, a Black woman who leads the National Education Association, the nation's largest union; Bonnie Castillo, and the first Latina to serve as executive director of National Nurses United; and April Verrett, who in May became the first Black woman to lead the Service Employees International Union, which says about 60% of its service worker members are people of color and 2/3 are women. And so, while female-dominated fields have made strides in union leadership diversity, there's still a long way to go, of course, because, as I said, there's a reactionary, backward element in this country politically. And despite some headway through DEI and apprenticeship programs, there hasn't been that kind of culture shift that we're still needing to see. Men still have a higher union membership rate than women, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and workplace sexual harassment and biases still run rampant in many places. And I would add, including the U.S. military, including the Chicago-based journey-level carpenter and member of Carpenters Union, Local 13, that was harassment and biases still run rampant in many places like that. And things might get better, according to at least one Latina woman who held union leadership roles. More Black and Latina women held more leadership roles, and were more aware of their membership's needs, including safety gear that fits women's bodies, parental leave, which some union leaders says are needed. Looking at education, teachers union have in recent years begun to use their collective power to push for wraparound benefits to help their surrounding community in a method known as bargaining for the common good, which aims to go beyond wages and benefits at the bargaining table and tackle wider social issues. The Chicago Teachers Union, for example, included demands for affordable housing citywide during a strike in 2019, in part organized by then Vice President Stacey Gates, who is now the CTU president. But I bring up the Teachers Union specifically because it gets us right back to what public schools are doing to help those who are developmentally disabled. A lot of people want vouchers for their developmentally or their disabled child to go to a private school, but public schools will have to compete for those kinds of vouchers, against those kinds of vouchers when they offer teachers offer to take care of developmentally disabled. The schools make room for them to go to regular schools like other kids in their neighborhoods. And shout out to teachers who have, given this special skill to work with that community. And there's a lot of extra work you have to put in to deal with people with developmental disabilities, especially when they're surrounded by children who probably don't understand them, probably bully them. And so teachers play a major role in all kids' lives, but developmental disabled, there's a special need to take care of them throughout the day. Things, like I said, could trigger them, and oftentimes they cannot stay home as they did during the pandemic and go to school virtually, even though that does help a lot of them. A lot of them want to continue doing that, but parents working, and it's almost impossible to do that. Or if they live in a group home, such as what I worked in to take care of them, it's impossible to stay home, have someone home all day with them until they graduated. Then, it could be scheduled to do that, but it takes a lot of patience to work with that population. So my hats off to teachers who, with all of the other political issues surrounding what they do, this is one of those areas. Developmental disability, taking care of students with developmental disabilities, is an extra added job that I think we need to congratulate them and celebrate them for. Hospitality, unionized hotel workers, like people who make strides toward fighting the rampant sexual harassment in their profession. Hispanic housekeeping, and as I said, the Unite Here union leader helped lead a successful push at hotels for workers to be equipped with panic buttons in 2018 to summon security help in emergency, now implemented by several major hotel chains. So we're looking at the different places where women are empowering themselves, as we are in the middle of a campaign, to elect the first woman, especially the first black woman, to the White House here in the United States. But we're looking at how women are faring, especially in union leadership around industries, different industries. We're looking at the flight attendants and how diverse, these unions and union memberships are. There's a name, Katura Johnson, who was a flight attendant in 2022, became the first queer woman of color to serve as international vice president for flight attendant union AFA-CWA, which is led by Sarah Nelson and represents over 50,000 flight attendants at 20 airlines. So there's a lot of diversity in this country, and people need to be empowered despite the prejudices that they face in everyday life and in the workforce. 813-239-9663. There's so much going on today as part of, we are also looking at how Florida is preparing for the storm. I know that we're looking at landfall possibly Wednesday here in Florida for Hurricane Milton. And it worries me how those with developmental disabilities are faring when the emergency is called, and when hurricanes happen, the lights go out, and they're triggered more than most. So it's important for those who work with that population to keep them calm. If you're going to a shelter, make certain that they stay calm. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. And don't forget that right here at WMNF, we have the emergency crank radio as part of our commitment to serve the community. If you are in need of an emergency crank radio, we have a limited supply here at the station available to our community members. For a donation of $30 to the station, you can pick up your crank radio today before 5 p.m. The radio offers solar power, USB charging, and hand crank. It has a flashlight, AM, FM, and weather broadcast. So just come by the station on MLK Boulevard today before 5 p.m. to get your emergency crank radio for a donation of $30. And if the capacity allows, we're going to make the same offer tomorrow, October 8th. But if you need, the crank radios come in very handy. I had a very basic one during Hurricane Katrina. That was 20 years ago. And it's still very fresh in my mind how, the community was able to come together, speak to each other, and speak to emergency helpers, first responders, and let people know what is happening outside of their door in the aftermath of Katrina. And if you had a crank radio, you were able to hear. And maybe if you had a cell phone at that time, I think we were still using Blackberries, you were still able to call into this 800 number and let the world know what is happening around you. So this is this is a great tool to have, the emergency crank radio. So we have a limited supply. Just come before 5 p.m. today here at the radio station. This is Community Speaks. My name is Patro Mabili, and we're here in Florida. Probably, everybody's wondering whether or not to evacuate, how we're going to fare in this storm. We've been pretty lucky lately. Maybe it'll just be like the last time, a major wind event. But the governor is certainly trying to get ahead of it by already declaring state of emergency in many counties because, that'll make it easier to get federal aid from FEMA. But one of the things we don't want to see happen is lies, political lies, be told around the storm, around an emergency like this. Last thing we need is disinformation, but it seems like it's become a cottage industry in this country. 813-239-9663 is the number to call if you want to join the discussion here on Community Speaks about what is happening around the world. Countries around the world right now commemorating the anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. And throughout this month, we, of course, are looking at part of our mission calendar, quality of life for those with disabilities, people with disabilities. And as I mentioned earlier, it's interesting to hear one Florida university making it possible to help educate people with disabilities for high-tech jobs, which would really help them. It'll help the society at large as well. But as I said, the world is commemorating what has happened on October 7th. We're going to remember October 7th, of course, because of what is happening, the ongoing crisis that seems to be happening. In the meantime, the United States has spent a record of at least $17.9 billion of military aid to Israel since the war in Gaza began. It led to escalating conflict around the Middle East. It's still escalating. That's according to a report by Brown University's Cost of War project, which was released today on the anniversary of Hamas's attacks on Israel. The report says an additional $4.86 billion has gone into stepped up U.S. military operations in the region since October 7th, 2023. Attacks including the cost of a Navy-led campaign to quell strikes on commercial shipping by Yemen's Houthis. It's one of the first tallies of these estimated U.S. costs. And the research was completed before Israel opened the second front against Hezbollah and Lebanon. So that being said, this cost is most likely going to continue to go up. It is one of the first tallies, as I said, of estimated U.S. costs as the Biden administration backs Israel in its conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon and seeks to contain hostilities by Iran-allied armed groups in the region. So financial toll is on top of the cost in human lives. Hamas militants killed more than 1,200 people in Israel a year ago and took others hostage. And Israel's retaliatory offensive has killed nearly 42,000 people in Gaza, according to the territory's health ministry, which does not distinguish between civilians and combatants in its count. And as I said, this has been record military aid to Israel as the cost continues to grow. Protege of the U.S. since 1948 founding, it's the biggest recipient of U.S. military aid in history, getting $251 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars since 1959. And even so, the $17.9 billion spent since October 7th of last year in inflated adjusted dollars is by far the most military aid sent to Israel in 1 year. The U.S. committed to providing billions of military assistance to Israel and Egypt each year when they signed their 1979 U.S. brokered peace treaty and an agreement since the Obama administration set the annual amount to for Israel at $3.8 billion through 2028. So the U.S. aid since the Gaza war started includes military financing, arms sales, at least $4.4 billion in drawdowns from U.S. stockpiles and hand-me-downs of used equipment. Much of the U.S. weapons delivered in the year were munitions from military, from artillery shells to 2,000-pound bunker busters and precision-guided missiles. That's the U.S. weapons that were delivered. The expenditures range from $4 billion to replenish Israel's Iron Dome. And as we saw last week, that came in handy once again as it faced a barrage of missile attacks on Israel again. This missile system to cash for, rifles and jet fuels. This, according to the studies, expenditures range from $4 billion to replenish Israel's Iron Dome and David's Sling missile defense systems. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. If you have something you'd like to add, information you'd like to add, go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hello, brother. How are you? Peace and blessings.
Good, you.
I just want to say this, that I definitely is not no expert on anything that's going on in the Middle East, but I can tell you that as an African person living in America, and if I recall all of the history and the pain and the suffering and the killing of black people in this country, the message that we are constantly receiving as a group, that war is not answered, that we need to try to have a peaceful negotiation, that we shouldn't look backwards, but we should look forward, right?
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely disgusting that the United States continue to support, in the name of Israel, have a right to defend itself, the ongoing mercilessly killing of innocent people. Innocent people. The children. The children are being killed. People that had nothing to do with the decision of October the 7th is just being slaughtered. And it's almost like Israel have all the military might, and these people that's on the ground got a butter knife. And it's being paid for by U.S. tax dollars. Dollars that now this United States citizens going to find themselves having a need for as they move from one storm system after the other. I think people have to have courage and just say no more war, no to war, no to seeing it coming in, perhaps going into World War III. Yeah. That somebody has to have the courage to say, no, we're not going to finance this in our name. But I think it's absolutely disgusting. And what's even more so disgusting about it is that Israel, Jewish people have been the recipient of a history of wars, and now they are administering that same pain and suffering on the Palestinian people. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. That's a very powerful feeling. And, war just keeps, meaning more war. And we never really get to the political solutions. Unlike the United States publicly documented military aid to Ukraine, it was impossible to get the full details of what the U.S. has shipped to Israel since last October 7th. So the $17.9 billion for the year is a partial figure, and that's according to the researchers. They cited Biden administration efforts to hide the full amounts of aid and types of systems through bureaucratic maneuvering, but funding for the U.S., for the key U.S. ally during the war, that has exacted a heavy toll on civilians, has divided U.S. citizens during this presidential campaign. But support for Israel has long carried weight in the U.S. politics, and Biden said Friday that no administration has helped Israel more than his administration has. The U.S. military operations in the Middle East, his Biden administration has bolstered its military strength in the region since the war in Gaza started, aiming to deter and respond to any attacks on Israeli and U.S. forces. And those additional operations cost at least $4.86 billion. In other words, almost $5 billion, and is not included beefed up U.S. military aid to Egypt and other partners in the region. So the U.S. had 34,000 forces in the Middle East the day that Hamas broke through Israel's barricades around Gaza to attack. And that number rose to about 50,000 in August. I guess when you're surrounded by those who insist on violence, you know, it's really a catch-22. It would be wonderful to wake up and say peace is broken out and that we're going to declare no more war anywhere at all. I guess, you know, this being the only way to deter war is to send military aid and make certain that, you know, there's a reasonable opportunity that violence won't continue to spread. But, you know, it has been really difficult, even though the United States is supporting with military ammunition and with other military aid. It has been hard to get the Prime Minister of Israel to listen to anybody who says the word ceasefire. And it's hard for, I guess, to ceasefire when those who insist on violence are continuing firing. So that's a catch-22. And I don't think that, you know, our elections are going to resolve that problem, since every president has resolved to support Israel. But one has to wonder, is Israel's behavior, and are they making smart decisions by continuing to promulgate war and continue to widening the conflict, feeling like they have to respond to every incident that happens, even if no Israeli lives are lost. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. A couple of issues that have been put on the table for today. We're talking about the growing conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, the growing death toll, and also opportunities for those people with disabilities, and how those with disabilities are responding, how they respond to events in the world. And also, we're also looking at the possibility of Category 5 hurricane heading straight to the state of Florida, and what we will do in preparation for it, and how we take care of those with disabilities, especially developmental disabilities, in the time of this, in the time of catastrophe, natural crisis such as a hurricane. 813-239-9663. As we are getting close to the end of this hour, of course, next hour, we're going to get back to the music with Blaine Whalen bringing It's the Music Monday. And we'll continue to watch for updates on the hurricane, Category 5 Hurricane Milton. We'll continue to watch events and forecasts there. In the meantime, taking your telephone calls, see where you are, how you're feeling in this moment with all that is happening. The Jewish Federation of Florida's Gulf Coast, they say they are very sorry to announce that they have canceled their October 7th commemoration scheduled for this evening, and they're concerned for the safety of Florida's Gulf Coast and have made this difficult decision to give our community time to properly prepare for the storm. So that won't be happening because the state of Florida is trying to prepare and be on top of that, what is going on. You are listening to Community Speaks. My name is Patro Mobili, your host. And, of course, we're going to get news updates from The Scoop, locally produced news, produced right here with our illustrious news team here at WMNF Radio. And then we're going to get back to the music. Landon Whalen is going to get back to the music with you. And you can ride out for the rest of the afternoon here on WMNF as you keep yourself calm. Meantime, we're still having a conversation here on Community Speaks. 813-239-9663. What's on your mind? How are you bringing it all together as we are talking about the geopolitical issue? We're talking about the geopolitical storms and how to help the disabled. 813-239-9663 has always been concerning to me how those who we took care of, developmentally disabled people, how they fare as adults. And are they in the streets at the time of a storm? Whether or not they have family who's engaged in their lives. A lot of them don't. Even though family could be right here in the state with them, they're just not engaged with them if they're developmentally disabled. If they're an adult, no longer a child, they have no place to stay, they're not in school, and there's no one there to take care of them because they've aged out of the system. That has always been a concern with me. I plan on, during the course of this month, following up on those that I personally took care of to find out how they're doing. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. You can write me, DJ at WMNF.org. And as war rages on in the Middle East, and as we prepare for a campaign that has been stocked full of lies, we are trying to make sense of it all here at WMNF. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. And here on Community Speaks, no issues are off the table. And we want to look at everything with eyes wide open. So we're going to take a listen to, well, we don't have any speeches to play today, but we're just looking at a lot of the memorials that are going on. It's really, Israelis are flocking to ceremonies, cemeteries, and memorial sites around the country, remembering the hundreds of victims, the dozens of hostages still in captivity. And so if we have a prime minister that's not listening to the rest of the world, it only sees what it wants to see and does what it wants to do, we're going to be very attentive to what is being said, because no one wants a wider war. I think that war is hell, and we don't want it to just keep spreading just because people have the arms to do so. Why is Hamas continuing to fight? Why are the Houthis joining in? Why has Hezbollah joined in? And there's some people who believe that some of those organizations were just basically shell organizations that were created just to keep this kind of warfare going. And looking at the Palestinian people, we want to hear more about the Palestinian leadership, Palestine Liberation Organization, and its historical presence. And the other party other than Hamas is Fatah. We don't hear a lot about them, and I think there are some peacemakers among them. But we need to hear more about them and get them to have more influence on what is happening in the Middle East. Sometimes, if you're living outside the country, even though the United States gives arms, they won't cease fire just because our president says so. And don't think 45 is going to have any more influence on that situation. If anything, he's probably not even paying a whole lot of attention. And we already know that when he was in office, the military general said it was hard to keep his attention when they were trying to brief him on international situations. But 813-239-9663, because this is all about getting a handle on where